Okay, looking at the last problem, the word problem, it says the Hat Me company has set up costs of $8,200 for the production of stylish hats. The cost to produce a single hat is $10.25. Let X represent the number of hats produced. Write an expression for the total production costs. So what would be the total production cost? Well, it would be $8,200 just to set up, right? And then plus 1025 for every hat. So right there, that's an expression because there's no equal sign. And this would give us the total production cost. Okay, so now we want to write a rational function that gives us the average cost. So we might call that a of x using function notation, the average cost per hat when x hats are produced. So the average would take the total cost, which we found in the last question, and what would you do to that total cost? Yes, you would divide it by X because that would actually tell you the average cost per hat. So if you take the total cost and divide it by the number of hats you produce, you'll get the average cost per hat. So then if we want to find the average cost of 500 hats produced, we would find A of 500, which would be 8,200 plus 1025 for every hat. So for 500 hats, and then we would divide by 500. If I want to put this in on one step on my calculator, I would need to use parentheses. So realize there is an implied parentheses here because we can't just cancel these 500s. We were talking about that with rational equations. We would need to find the total cost and then divide it by the number of hats. So if I do parentheses 8,200 plus 1025 times 500 hats, that right there is going to be my total cost. If I divide that now by 500, now if you don't put the parentheses around the whole numerator and you do the divide by 500, you're not going to get the right answer. So you could do it in two steps in that case. So this tells us that it's going to cost us $26.65. Wow, that doesn't seem like very much money, $26.65. But what does this answer represent? That's the whole point of the complete sentence, right? So what does 26.65 represent? The average cost, yes, of each hat is $26.25. Now, how many people buy baseball hats or any kind of hats? Do they cost $26.25? I don't know how much they cost. I mean, that's the cost right there. That's the cost to produce them. If you're trying to make a profit, you want to sell them for more. So, do you think it would be wise if you're the hat producer to make more hats? Let's look at the average for 10,000 hats. The average cost, how would I find the average cost for 10,000 hats? I take the 8,200 setup plus 1025 for 10,000 hats. And what am I going to do to this whole thing? By 10,000. So let's find the average cost. Now, some of the newer calculators, you can do this where you can like back it up and then push enter, and it'll give me that same thing, and then I could go in and edit these. It's kind of even more work because I have to insert. Insert. I want... How many zeros is 10,000? Is that enough? That's 4 zeros. Okay. 1 0 0 0 0. There we go. Okay, and now what happens to the average cost when I make more hats? It goes down. The average cost goes down. So the average cost, cost of each is 1107. And that's like where they're able to now sell it for a decent price and still make some money on it, right? Find out how many hats must be produced for the average cost to be $20 per hat. So based on these, we know that if the average cost was going to be $20 per hat, it would have to be more than 500 hats, but probably less than 10,000 hats. So how would I set this up? Well, I'm actually wanting to solve where A of x equals 20. You see the difference? I don't have the x. So this one is I want to solve. I have to take the equation 8,200 plus 1025 per hat. I don't know the x value, so I'm leaving the x's in there. I'm going to set this whole thing equal to what? To 20. Okay, so now I need to actually solve for x. I want to figure out what x value this would be. So anybody have any thoughts on how I could solve this? Solving a rational equation. What would you do? Yeah, multiply both sides by x, right? That's the idea of a proportion, or that's the same thing as clearing fractions. If I multiply this side by x and this side by x, because that's the lowest common denominator, I would get 8,200 plus 1025x equals 20x. And what would you do next to solve for x? Subtract maybe 1025x from both sides, get all of your x's onto one side. 8,200 equals 9.75x, is that correct? And now what could you do to solve for x now? And we get x equals, I don't know that mental math, so I'll use my calculator. 8,200 divided by 9.75 equals, and that makes sense. Is that right? Did you guys get that? Yeah. So about 841 hats. It will take 841 hats to make the average cost $20. Something like that, right? And you could always plug your number back in, but you can kind of see from the fact that we evaluated by plugging in those two that $20 would be in between that. And so it kind of makes sense that 841 would be a reasonable amount.